In one state where gas is 15 cents higher per gallon than the national average, voters are hearing from leaders about what they want to do if their team gets into the governor's office. Incumbent Governor J.B. Pritzker is the Democrat seeking a third term, and he faces a rematch against former Republican State Senator Darren Bailey. A third independent candidate, Colin Corbett, has also joined that race. Now, Bailey's running mate, Illinois Republican Lieutenant Governor candidate Aaron Delmar, he joins us now. Aaron, thanks for taking time with us today here on The States. How does a Bailey administration bring down the cost of something like gasoline, which is noticeably much more expensive than some of the neighboring states?
Well, it's because we have one of the highest gas tax in the United States. That's something that really needs to be revisited, and how we're going to fund our roads and our bridges. We have a $3 billion surplus currently in our coffers for those road productions. So I think it's time to give Illinois drivers a little bit of a break, especially right now where this conflict in Iran continues on. That's just the first step of the Bailey-Delmar plan of affordability. We need to look at how we can reform and rebuild Illinois' taxing structure, starting right off with property taxes. That's probably the number one killer and why Illinois is so unaffordable to live in. And, Darren and I have a vision where we can look at how we can refund education and making sure that the state funds education at its level so we can offer property tax relief for local school boards and local governments that continually have to rise because Illinois is not paying its fair share back to its local municipalities. That along with making sure that Illinois is one of the safest places to live, which it currently isn't. And we're not just talking about Chicago. And again, making sure that quality education is available to every Illinois student, not just the ones that have rich parents and those that live in the upper echelons of the suburban areas. Those are the three main issues: that affordability, the public safety, and that quality education.
Now, let's talk a little bit more about the gas tax. 2019, the governor, along with bipartisan support in the General Assembly, doubled that gas tax, tacked on a increase each year, July 1st. We're not having that increase right now for 6 months under the new budget the governor signed, but there was only, 1.5 penny or something per gallon. Do you feel that there's enough momentum to possibly reverse course and bring that gas tax back down? How do you get that across to a bipartisan group in the General Assembly?
Well, I think everybody's feeling the pinch of that gas tax. If gas was free in Illinois, you'd be paying 76 cents per gallon, right? That's a whopping 76 cents per gallon that is tacked on top of it. And of course, in the state of Illinois, under J.B. Pritzker and the Democratic majority, you got sales tax on top of that 76 cents per gallon. Illinois is ripe for tax reform. J.B. Pritzker has to stop treating Illinois like he treats his personal finances and just keep throwing money at it without actually solving the problem. When people start talking about revenue sources, what they're talking about is jacking Illinois taxes. You see a $56 billion budget that J.B. Pritzker and the Democratic majority just passed. That's $16 billion more than it was when he took office. It is just crushing individual constituents here in our great state. And people are moving out. They're moving across the borders. They're buying their things across borders in Indiana, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Missouri. And it shouldn't be that way. Under a Bailey-Delmar administration, we're going to start rolling a lot of these taxes back. We're going to be looking at our NGOs or non-governmental organization and how grant dollars are spent. $18.5 billion are being spent on these subcontractors. We're going to be looking at the central management system and how our procurement and how we buy things in Illinois, restructuring there. It is ripe for reform. I mean, you look at a state representative just indicted less than a week ago for diverting, those NGO dollars, those non-government organizations to, enrich her family, enrich her daughter. I'm very confident she's going to be spending a lot of time in federal prison. That's the roadmap for Illinois and how we can reform and rebuild our great state and make it a lot easier for Illinoisans to live here.
I want to go a little bit more into the Carol Ammons case, which you highlighted there. She faces federal charges. But before we get to some of that and some of the politics around that and how at least your campaign may use that heading into November, but just talk a little bit more about policy. You addressed, maybe going through a fine-tooth comb with the budget and whatnot, but what are some other things that a Bailey-Delmar administration could do immediately without having to go to the General Assembly?
Well, one of the first things right off the bat, in using that example of Representative Amons, is the member initiative. Member initiative is a program that a lot of people in Illinois don't understand. Every Democratic state rep gets $1 million to put wherever they want. Every Democratic state senator in Illinois gets $3 million to put towards whatever they want back their home districts, while leaving the 40 state reps that are Republican and the 18 state senators are Republican nothing to bring back to their districts. That's something that is incredibly wrong with Illinois, because all of Illinoisans, regardless if you're represented by a Republican or Democrat, pay our state income taxes. They pay our absorbent property taxes, but yet they don't get the initial benefit. But using that for corruption and fraud, right? When you have these members that are redistricting these millions of dollars of our taxpayer monies, and then having it enrich their own families, right? They can't do that individually. They need to get the rest of their legislative caucus with them. So they're all complicit with this fraud and this abuse. And I think Carol Emmons is just scratching the surface. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that as we start to unravel more. From an ethics reform, that's another broad area. Look at Representative Harry Benton. It just came out today that, the leader of the Illinois House knew about this sexual harassment 3 years ago and took no action. I mean, Illinois is just corrupt. It needs reform. It needs rebuilt. It needs the leadership of Darren Bailey and Aaron Dalmar to take over the administration and get it on the right track.
What kinds of headway are you guys making in the Chicago area? I know 4 years ago, Darren had some, choice words, some would say, about Chicago. Right. What's the approach this time around to try to capture some of that segment's votes in the Windy City?
Well, I think the first step was, Darren bringing me on. I mean, I am originally from Chicago, from the Portage Park area. I was in the failed Chicago public school system where, I had to leave in fourth grade because I couldn't read, I couldn't write, I couldn't count at fourth grade level. And my parents were fortunate enough to scrape some money together and move us to the suburbs so I could get access to a better education. That's probably one of the first steps, because I look, and I act like a Chicagoan because I am from Chicago. I think the next step is we're going to places that most people would not expect us to be. We're going into the southwest side of Chicago, where a lot of Republicans, don't tend to go into. We're going into areas and events. I'm talking to constituents. 4 years ago, Illinois was bad, but 4 years now, it's even worse. The political climate has changed so much. There is a ton of people that are incredibly unhappy with the last 7.5 years. They're unhappy with the costs. They're unhappy with the failed education system. They're unhappy that they don't feel safe going to work, going to school, and just coming home. And that's created an environment where people are looking for new leadership. There's J.B. Pritzker fatigue everywhere in the city of Chicago. The only person, that polls worse than Donald Trump in Chicago is Brandon Johnson. They're upset with the mayor. Our own Chicago Bears, our NFL franchise, is leaving. People are getting wake-up calls in areas they would not normally expect and think about. And it's created an environment where they want new change. And Darren Bailey can provide that.
There are some members of the General Assembly who are right there on the edge of being a Democrat or a Democrat socialist. A few kind of more the left liberal side of the caucus there. What's your campaign doing to maybe support some of the Republicans who are running to try to have Republicans gain some ground against maybe a further left-leaning Democratic caucus?
Well, I think, Darren and I are trying to use our campaign not only to take back the governor's mansion, but to lift all ships up and down the ballot. We've got a great team of candidates that are running with us statewide: Brian Drew, Don Tracy. There's some great ones, but we also have our county board candidates, our local state reps and state senators, and we're working with them. I mean, our platform wasn't just created thinking about the ideas of Darren and I, but also getting feedback and buy-in from the rest of the ticket and down ballot. And these issues we're talking about aren't Republican. They're not Democrat. They're good for everybody in Illinois. These are what we call 80-20, 90-10 issues. We're not digging into a lot of the social rhetoric that Darren did 4 years ago. We want to do the main core responsibilities of government really, really well. And then we can start talking about other special pet projects. But as long as Illinois is failing at its core services, it's not keeping people safe. It's not affordable. We're not delivering on public education. Those are the main things that people are looking at. Then we can start talking about some of the other projects. But everyone can see across the United States, the Democratic Socialist Party has been failing. They might have been getting elected, but they can't govern. The second they actually have to take that seat and actually govern people, they can't show any progress. They can't show any success. And that's what we're going to highlight when people start talking about it.
Now, Aaron, of course, we've got a few more months here before the November election, and it's not just between incumbent Pritzker and Darren Bailey. You've got a third candidate in this race with the independent candidate, Colin Corbett. What are your thoughts about his campaign in this race, and do you guys have concerns that he may chip away at some of the votes?
You know, I don't spend pretty much any time thinking about him. I mean, I know that he's joining the campaign to try to tag team along with Pritzker to attack Darren Bailey and I, because they see the same polling that we see, that we have the vision and we have the understanding of what Illinoisans want to see moving forward. And, you know, his independent campaign, or whatever you want to call it, I don't lose a whole lot of sleep over it. Would I like to have a binary race between directly with us and JB Pritzker? Sure. But, you know, he might capture a couple uninformed voters, but those that do the time and the research and the real people that are living in Chicago, living in one of the 102 counties of Illinois, can clearly see a comparison and contrast, because we're proving the point why J.B. Pritzker should be fired and why Darren Bailey and Aaron Delmar should be hired. And it couldn't be any clearer. And so, you know, Colin can do whatever he wants to do, and he has the right to run for any office he wants, but it's not making an impact any stretch of the imagination. And, you know, we're excited about our opportunity to get our state on the right track and get a victory in November.
Well, Aaron Delmar, Lieutenant Governor candidate for the Republicans in Illinois, greatly appreciate you taking the time with us. We'll keep a close eye on what's going on with that race here with the Center Square.